this segment over the next few minutes on Mom FM's Facebook page, our Hot Country Hits Facebook page, our YouTube channel, WMOM's YouTube channel, as well. Listen to it over 102.7 Mom FM, Hot Country Hits 99.9, and of course over your Amazon Alexa, your Google Home, and our West Michigan radio app. So lots of ways to talk about and kind of dive into this. And I've got some notes, John. John U. Bacon. If you are not familiar, and I'm sure there's some readers out there, there are some individuals that have not only probably read your books, but are excited to be able to have you on the air with us. So first, thanks for being a part of the conversation this morning.
Chris, thank you.
Absolutely. You have made your way to Whitefish Point up in the UP, just off the coast to where the Edmund Fitzgerald sank 50 years ago in 1975. And for our listeners and viewers this morning, if you're not familiar with John U. Bacon, let me kind of break this down for you. You are a New York Times best-selling author, journalist and educator with more than 3 decades in work, writing, public speaking, college instructing from the University of Michigan, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be happy about that. And as you said off the air, maybe some won't too, but your experience of being a Michigander, pretty awesome. You began your journalism career covering high school sports for the Ann Arbor News, then wrote for the Detroit News starting in 1995. You've worked for the New York Times, ESPN, the magazine. You've authored multiple books on sports, business, leadership, history. Your bestsellers, Bo's Lasting Lessons. And if I get any of this wrong, you let me know. And if you want to add anything to it as well. But Bo's Lasting Lessons, the legendary coach teaches the timeless fundamentals of leadership. The Great Halifax Explosion. And one of the books that we're going to be talking about that you just recently came out with, that you have been on tour, The Gales of November, The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. You are a regular on radio and television, and hometown still Ann Arbor. Is that right?
It is.
All right. Well, you've been flying and driving everywhere and taking a few minutes out with us today. First, what has it been like, the book tour side of things? And then for our listeners and viewers, if you've ever wanted to really know about the Edmund Fitzgerald from the perspective of somebody that has researched it out, you have exhausted years and put it down on paper, and we're excited to talk about that. But tell us about this experience traveling around the country with your book now.
Well, Chris, thank you for all that. Excuse me, geez. I've been traveling almost nonstop since the book came out on October 7th, Miami to Montana. How about that? Yeah. So about 20 stops in 10 states in 4 weeks. So we're on the move. And today, of course, near Whitefish Point. What has been very gratifying, we knew we'd have a dad book, quote unquote, a book to give to dad for the holidays, Father's Day, and so on. We certainly expected to do well in the Great Lakes, naturally, as far as the appeal there to the topic. But what has happily surprised us is how broad the demographics are for this book. That people in Miami have been snapping it up. Washington, D.C., we had a sellout. Butte, Montana, on the Meat Eaters podcast, which has gone viral as well. On Goodreads.com, 2/3 of the reviewers reviewing are women, often under 50 and 40 years old, who read fiction as a rule, not nonfiction. So I saw some of the families here last night, and they're all kind of gratified to know that the story has expanded the base and more have taken an interest in it, including TikTok, Gen Z stuff, and Instagram, you name it. So that has been a pleasant surprise for me and the families.
Would you say that, and I'm very curious about this as you bring up the families of those 29 individuals that were on the Edmund Fitzgerald that went down 50 years ago. Was it easy to have conversations with them now that so much time has passed? Or is it still difficult? What's that like from that perspective when sitting down with them?
Well, kind of both. I was lucky there. Bruce Lynn, the executive director of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum here at Whitefish Point, he already knew the families, knew them well, gained their trust. He had been very protective of them for 10, 20 years. He and I hit it off. He'd already read The Great Halifax Explosion, which you mentioned, heard me on the radio and so on. So we kind of started on second base, if you will,
Mhm.
and then gained his trust. And then he ultimately kind of gave me the keys to the kingdom, if you will, by having given access to these people. And that has worked out very well. They're very happy with the book. They feel like their dad's been presented fairly and honestly, and in full. And the driving force for me, Chris, in this book was not simply to find out what happened. It's difficult to do that even now. But we certainly strengthened some theories and I think weakened others. But that was not the point for me. The point for me is the 29 men who'd been on the ship that really we didn't know at all. I didn't know, certainly, and what their stories were, what their lives were like on board, on shore, what were their families like. So I got to 14 of the 29 families, and 6 crewmen had been on the ship the years before, obviously before it went down, including 2 that year who knew the captain, knew the crew, and could talk knowledgeably and even affectionately about these people.
Mhm. When you were diving into this, and you brought up a very, very good point, some research that I had found out was, and when we look at movies and TV series of crews that are on these ships, it's not where they're on for the day and then they're off for the week or anything like that. They were on for the entire season, and these families, they did not see their loved ones for long periods of time.
It's a crazy lifestyle, and I kind of concluded, Chris, this is an almost an invisible industry, shipping, Great
Mhm.
Lakes shipping, and I couldn't figure out why. And then you realize there are only 30 men on a ship. Now it's co-ed, of course. Back then it was men. 30 crew on a ship, only 300 ships. That's only 9,000 people spread out over 8 Great Lakes states, including, of course, Michigan.
Yeah.
So you're not likely to meet them, and even if they live next door, Chris, you're still not going to meet him because that guy's on a ship
Yeah.
9 months out of the year straight. No breaks back then. No weddings, anniversaries, graduations, birthdays. So you miss a whole lot, and it's hard for the people on board. It's hard for the families too. And as one of the old sailors told me, he said, "Look, I've got 3 kids. He lives in Traverse City. I'm
Mhm.
very close to all of them, and I taught none of them how to throw a baseball or ride a bike. And that's got to break your heart. So it's a hard life for everybody, pretty much. But the money is good. And these guys, of course, often grew up in the Great Depression, World War II. So they were happy to have a good job that was not in a mine, frankly.
Well, and I always wonder about this when they were on a ship like this, and we talk about November. We're in November now. We're starting to see some winter storms, but it was very different up in Lake Superior for these crews. Did you get the impression that it was a race to the end when it's the final days of the season? Because when they're coming from Wisconsin for that last voyage down, and they were traveling down to Detroit, um, they were toughing this out, and either you get used to it or you want to be done with it for the year. What impression did you get from the families and from other sailors, I guess, too?
Well, that's a good insight. One of my experts, a few of the sailing guys I talked to, the veteran sailors, said some guys can't wait to get off the ship, and some guys can't wait to get on it.
Mm.
It kind of depends what you have going on at home, I guess,
Yeah.
during that time. So that all depends on the mindset, certainly. But you are right that this is supposed to be the last trip of the year, no matter what.
Mm.
And Ernest McSorley had promised his wife Nellie, as 5 other men on the ship had done, that this was going to be their last season, 1975, and the last trip of the season was supposed to be the week before.
Mm.
And Ernest McSorley taxed this last trip on 3 more days from Superior, Wisconsin, near Duluth, to Toledo, to dock up for the year. And they tacked that trip on, one more trip, for him to get his bonus to pay for his wife's medical care. She was in 24-hour care at that point, probably for cancer. So it's even more heartbreaking knowing what the mindset was. But these guys were very eager to get to drop off the load in Detroit and get to Toledo for the winter. Then they get 3 months off. I mean, okay, the season's very hard, 9 months. Then you got a lot of money in your pocket, and you got 3 months off to spend it. That's a very good place to be. So these guys are looking forward to seeing their families. Some are going to retire. 2 guys on the ship, the deckhands, Bruce Hudson and Mark Thomas, were about to hop into Bruce Hudson's hotshot 1972 Dodge Challenger muscle car, this beautiful burgundy car, which is still around and still in mint condition, by the way. with a
Awesome.
sticker for the Fitzgerald in the passenger window in the back. So that's how proud he was of that. They're about to go on this trip across the country, Chris, to go to Colorado for Coors beer, which back then was exotic. How about that?
Yep.
Then go to LA, of course, and come back along Route 66. In the meantime, Bruce Hudson finds out from his girlfriend, Cindy Reynolds, that she is pregnant. And guess what? That's going to change your life quite a bit. So then she tells me, you know what? Go on the trip anyway. The baby's not due till June. He assures her, we're going to move in together, raise a child ourselves. We'll be okay. So he was in for the biggest year of his life before this trip.
Yeah. Wow. And every one of those stories, well, I'll ask the question this way. Do you think all the authors like yourself and others have been able to, and it's 50 years that have passed, obviously, have been able to bring out those stories? I mean, with 29 sailors out there,
Mm.
um, and you mentioned you reached about 14 of those families.
Mhm.
There's probably a good portion of the rest that just didn't want to share these kind of stories or not do that. Is that fair to ask?
That's possible. All the ones I approached were happy to talk, um,
Okay.
ultimately, and that was very helpful. Of course, some of course did not have family. Um, Eddie Binden, 47 years old, first assistant engineer on the ship. He was about to retire himself after this trip, and his lovely wife Helen, and they're pictured in the book, was waiting for him in Toledo. The day before they left, he bought her a 2-carat diamond ring to celebrate their 25th anniversary. And instead, Chris, of simply stuffing that in your duffel bag, you're going to see her in 3 days on the dock anyway. For some reason, he gave it to a friend of his in Duluth with a love note and said, please send all this to my wife.
Oh my
And we
God.
don't know why he did it. Only he knows. But of course, after the ship went down, she received that in the mail and wore that ring the rest of her life and never remarried.
Hmm.
But he does not have any children. They did not have any children. So in some cases that happened fairly often. You have 6 young deckhands who did not, have kids, except for Bruce Hudson, basically. So that certainly happened. But also, I don't know how often other authors have tried. I do know that in all 14 cases, this is the first time they've ever talked to a reporter, as well as the first 6 crew members to
Hmm.
talk to a reporter. So that has been, I think, very good for the readers, and I hope very good for them as well.
This book, and for those that are joining us, if you're just joining us, we're talking with John U. Bacon, best-selling author, and the book, "The Gales of November: The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald." You just published this. How long ago now? It's been out, because the distribution is pretty much everywhere at this point. So it's been out for a little bit here, right?
Yeah, I got out October 7th, so about 5 weeks ago, I guess. And it is a number 6 New York Times bestseller. And then they'll be list again the next week. So it's doing very well. And we're coast to coast. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and all your local bookstores are carrying it. Local bookstores are really pushing this, which has been great. You can
Yeah.
find all that on johnnubacon.com, how to order the book in case you're curious, including how to find your local bookstore that has it. So.
And we're going to be giving a few of those copies away to the listeners coming up this morning on the Morning Zoo. You have to be well. Is there some pride behind this story? Is there some humbling? What's the emotion that you draw the most from writing this book and talking with all of these individuals and able to share their stories?
Well, it's got to be humbling on a few levels. One, on the very simple level that without the song, there is no book. So Gordon Lightfoot did a wonderful job with the song naturally, and the families loved that song. They loved him. They knew him very well. So that's one aspect. But two, I was also humbled, Chris, when I started this project. I thought I knew it fairly well. I traveled the state for the Detroit News for a year doing these kind of stories and knew a lot about it. Had a 50-page proposal. It was approved by the publisher, of course, so I wasn't starting in cold. Man, 95% of the stuff in this book I did not know 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I grew up in the Great Lakes. I've sailed Port Huron and Mackinac. I've swam in all these lakes, and I've sailed on a few of them and boated on a few of them and so on. I thought I knew it, and I really didn't. So I was humbled to learn how important Great Lakes shipping is. It is 6 times more efficient than trucks and 3 times more efficient than trains. Humbled to learn 45 to 75, our region was the Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley. And again, I grew up here as a history major. I should have a better grasp of that. But also how important Great Lakes shipping is. As one of my sources said, it said, look, the cement in your basement, the car in your driveway, and the food on your table, that's all Great Lakes shipping. And they're right. And it's an invisible industry, as we said before, but it's where all our stuff comes from.
Yeah, yeah. And, in Ludington with the Badger going back and forth between Manitowoc and Ludington, that was just a one sliver now that we see of the multiple ships that were out on the Great Lakes, out on Lake Michigan back
Well,
in
you're
the
right. I mean, there are 300 ships back then. Now it's about 100, although a lot of them are bigger ships. So it's about half as much cargo. But Ed Wiltsey, the captain of the Badger, out of Ludington to Manitowoc, as you say, he's in the book.
Mm.
He's one of my experts on this subject, and he told me that when it even gets to 5 feet waves on Lake Michigan, you don't go out on that boat because land lubbers like you and me, Chris, will not have a good time.
No, absolutely.
Let's just
Absolutely.
say that the lunch counter is closed for a lot of good reasons and so on. These guys faced 30 footers that night, all night long, some as far as 40, 50, and 60. And these are the kind of guys when they're 15 and 20-foot waves, they don't lose their lunch. So it's a different breed of cat who gets on these ships, to say the least, and a very impressive bunch.
If you are just joining us, John Bacon joining us this morning, best-selling author. This is 6th on the New York Times best-selling at this moment right now. And let's see if it will climb higher. Hopefully it will, just based on just conversations like this. But you mentioned something a couple moments ago about the last 4 years. And prior to that, you didn't know 90% or more of what you put in the book. I'd like to put you on the spot for just a moment, if you would, if that's okay, for our listeners, and give us some of those points that you just were shocked to hear or understand or put the piece of puzzle together. What were some of those?
Great question. A lot of them. How about this? The Great Lakes are as big as all of New England plus the state of New York.
Mm,
I knew they're big. I didn't realize they're that big.
yeah.
Lake Superior itself is as big as Ireland.
Mm,
So that puts it in context. I was also really shocked to learn from my expert sailors who had been on, and when I say sailors, these are guys who are on freight ships, not sailboats. The guys who had worked on both the Atlantic and the Great Lakes, which is a lot of these guys sooner or later, they say consistently and with reason that the Great Lakes are actually more dangerous than the Atlantic Ocean, which I couldn't believe.
wow.
But it's due to the salt water on the ocean. Of course, it takes the pointy waves and smooths them out and spreads them out. They come half as fast as the Great Lakes waves. Also, the storms you have in the ocean are 500 to 1,000 miles away, and the Great Lakes, they're what's called locally occurring storms, Chris. And I asked one of my experts, what does that mean? He goes, it's right over your damn head. So,
Absolutely.
and in Ludington, I mean, you're right there.
Hmm.
You can be out in the morning fishing on a beautifully pleasant day, and you are looking for safe harbor before lunch.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, it
10
happens
minutes down the
very
road.
fast. Well,
Yeah.
exactly. This is part of your job, right? So this happens very fast on our lakes. It does not happen that fast on the ocean. So for those reasons, and also the fact that on the ocean, of course, you leave New York, you point your ship towards Portugal, and you're basically an autopilot for a week, and you're not going to
Mm,
see any islands or shoals or other ships. On the Great Lakes, man, only 2/3 of your trip is in open water. One
mm,
third is canals, rivers, bridges, shoals, islands, other ships, breakwaters, you name it. There's a lot to look out for, and the captain's got to handle it all. No harbor pilots, no tugboats. That's all on the captain now, he or she. How
mm,
about that?
yeah.
But that was one of the big shocks right there. And it's also uh, impressed to learn just how impressive the Edmund Fitzgerald was. It was famous before it went down in shipping circles. It was the legend of the Great Lakes. It was considered the Titanic of the 300 ships, with the
Mhm.
best captain and the best crew. People at Sault Ste. Marie and Port Huron, where the ship would commonly go through, they would wait a day to see that ship go by. And one of the
Wow.
guys on the ship told me, who'd been on the ship previously, you better have your hair right when you're on this ship because you're going to get your photo taken about 100 times a day. So
Yeah.
it was that kind of ship.
Well, and it sounded like they were fine with it, that celebrity feel as they went through the Sioux Locks and, were close to shore. It was a massive vessel, and you can certainly clear up any of these facts. But over 700 feet long, 26,000 tons it could hold. I was really interested to find out that the first time it went out in the, I think 58, it was
That's correct.
okay, that it held only 20,000 tons that first time because they were a little bit worried that it might ground as it moved out. But eventually 26,000 tons was probably its normal weight. And then the interesting fact that that night 50 years ago, it wasn't just waves that were crashing over the sides. It was where the ship was. It was going underwater in during these waves, where I guess they call it green water, if that makes
Yes.
sense. Tell us a little bit about what you found out about those points, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, I mean, when it happened, it was truly the perfect storm. That line's been used by Sebastian Younger in his great book, but that's what it was on this trip. They leave on Sunday, November 9th, and it's 70 degrees in Duluth, 70, not 17.
Yeah.
And that gets your attention right there. It shouldn't be. It's like today, it's like 25 degrees here, as it is normally up in Whitefish Point. That's bad news because, as you know, the longer winter takes to arrive, the angrier it shows up. So that's
Mm.
one problem. You've got a winter storm coming in from Alberta, Canada. You've got another storm coming in with hot, wet air from the southwest of the United States. And they knew about half of this. So the captain was not well informed by these forecasts, unfortunately. So all that converges right in front of Whitefish Bay, like a catcher guarding home plate. Whitefish Bay is the drain of the bathtub that is Superior, if you will. That's
Mhm.
what you're trying to get to, that safe harbor. So that's the whole goal. And of course, on their way down on Monday, November 10th, the second day of the trip, 100-mile-per-hour winds, waves that are 30, 40, 50, even 60 feet high. As one of my experts, David Schwab, who studied this with computer models for Michigan Tech, University of Michigan, as well as the NOAA, he said this ship managed to find itself in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. He
Wow.
said green water. White splashy water looks kind of scary. What scares these guys is the green water. That means a whole wave is coming over you. That means you are truly underwater. And it
Mm.
was underwater every 4 to 8 seconds with each wave, and just kept on coming up, kept on coming up, kept on coming up. But finally, of course, at least one time it did not.
Yeah. It was such a horrible tragedy for so many, 29 lives lost, as we mentioned, families, but it also set a perspective for the Coast Guard on their reaction to this.
Mhm.
They had to reach out to other ships that were in the area for help to find that. I can't imagine, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this. Is that time factor? You had the is it the Arthur? There was a ship that was
Arthur
that
Anderson.
they went out to try to find the Edmund Fitzgerald in the dark of Superior at night, and trying to get other ships to do the same. What research did you find in regards to that, and did anything open your eyes in that part of the story?
Well, the whole thing is really quite incredible. And believe it or not, I had to cut this book from 800 pages to about 388 in the final.
Mm.
So there's a lot more than I knew that I can put in, but you can only push the reader so hard, right?
Yeah.
But there we go. The Arthur Anderson, a great ship that is still around. I was on it last summer, taking the same route. I got very lucky on that. It was chasing the Edmund Fitzgerald that night, and the second day about 10 to 15 miles behind. But it was the ship that was communicating with the Arthur Anderson. I'm sorry, with the Edmund Fitzgerald throughout that night, including the last transmission at 7:10 on Monday, November 10th, when Captain McSorley is asked by Arthur Anderson Captain Bernie Cooper, "How are you making out with your problems?" And McSorley says, "We are holding our own," and that is the last transmission. And of
Yeah.
course, the Arthur Anderson itself is fighting for its life, trying to get in 30, 40-foot waves back to Whitefish Bay. They get there at 9 o'clock at night, 2 hours after the last communication, which is probably when the ship went down, of course. And then they're told by the Coast Guard, search ships can't go out that night for various reasons. So they asked these ships, these iron ore carriers and limestone carriers and so on, that are not search ships, to go
Mhm.
back out and look for a ship that the captains already know cannot be found. You
Yeah.
don't lose a 729-foot ship in the middle of the lake, of course. No radar detection, no signals, no lights. So they know what's happened basically. But they went out. They went out in 30 or 40-foot waves. They had already saved their own lives and put their lives back on the table and rolled the dice again. And I asked one guy, I found Rick Barthuli. This is a great find. He's probably the last surviving member of the Arthur Anderson that night. And he's still sharp as can be. And he can tell us almost exactly what it was like to be an hour behind it and what those waves were like. And he said, look, we knew it was a bad idea to go back out. We could lose our own ship and our lives with it, of course. But we never hesitated. That one guy in that ship thought twice. And I said, why? And he said, because they would do it for us. It is the sailor's code. And when you hear the accounts of the survivors of the Bradley in 1958, the Morel in 1966, in both cases, one raft of sailors survived. And they said the only thing keeping us alive was the thin thought that somewhere out there on shore or on the seas already will be some stranger willing to risk his own life to save mine, because that's the only way he can save my life is to risk yours. So that's what sent those guys out for hours. And they have to turn around in these 30, 40-foot waves. That's the scariest part for them. They didn't find anything but debris, of course.
Yeah.
But that to me is heroic.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to start seeing debris like a half of a lifeboat, obviously the life preservers, um, as you mentioned, they knew what had happened, especially when a ship sinks to 500 plus feet, below the surface of the lake. Um, this is a book that you had wanted to write for a long time. What inspired you to start writing this? What was the first moments that you thought about this?
Well, I pitched it to an agent about 20 years ago who said no. But 5 years ago, I've got a new agent. So that agent said yes.
Okay. Well, that puts it together.
Right. I
Absolutely.
was kind of surprised to learn my files that I already had 20 pages on this.
Yeah.
So I'd already been diving into it clearly and was serious about it. But like I said earlier, what drove me was not the whodunit aspect of what happened, although I'm certainly curious about that. And I think, again, strengthen certain theories and weaken others. Um, Ruth Hudson, the mother of Bruce Hudson, a 22-year-old deckhand on that ship. He's the one, of course, with the girlfriend in Toledo and the road trip about to happen. She had the best line on this. Only 30 know, 29 men and God, and no one's talking. So we can never quite fully find that out, I don't think, without witnesses, and we don't have any witnesses. But I also think what drove me was the 29 men. Just trying to find out more about them, what their lives are like, what their jobs are like. I also want to learn more about the Great Lakes and shipping itself. I present the Edmund Fitzgerald as just the pinnacle of this industry that we know so little about, as I said. But man, our buildings, our cars, our food, our basements, they all come from these ships. So I wanted to find out more about what is this whole industry about. Because again, one of my experts said, we know the farmer, the fisherman, the factory worker, the miner, but nobody knows the sailor. And that's what I wanted to fix.
That's a very good point. I know we've talked quite a bit this morning. I'd like to, talk to you for just a few more minutes if you've got some time there.
Sure.
I know it's a busy time. You're at Whitefish Point
Right.
up in the UP. It is expected at least 1,000, maybe even a couple thousand. Just depends on what happens today. But really, most of the activities will take place, I believe, later this evening.
Well, the big one is the 2 o'clock is for the entire public. And that's when hundreds or maybe thousands might be showing up. There are no tickets, so it's hard to estimate, hard to predict. But at night, it'll be a private event at 7 o'clock at the museum for 80 people. And that's almost all of them the family. And I'll be speaking to that as well. But that is not open to the public.
And your thoughts on, I mean, you mentioned this early on about, Gordon Lightfoot, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. That song has kind of propelled this through the decades here. Do you think that in your opinion, the Edmund Fitzgerald, without a song like that, or without, having the museum and such, would be kind of like the other hundreds and hundreds of shipwrecks that were out there? What would be the difference, do you think?
Oh, it's just you got to be humble enough to realize without the great song by Gordon Lightfoot, he did a wonderful job with it. It's 95% accurate. Without that song, we're not talking about this today. There are 6,000 shipwrecks, as I said, between 1875 and 1975. That's one per week, every week for a century. And everyone knows one. And everyone knows one because of the song. It's
Hmm.
also the mystery of it, I think. But also, here's another stunning stat. Since November 10th, 1975, there's been not one commercial shipwreck on the Great Lakes, no loss of life on a shipwreck. And that's a large part of it is the Fitzgerald. As one of my experts said, when do you fix anything? When it's broken.
Hmm.
So that's part of their legacy as well, is because of them, and the families know this. No one has lost their life in one of these shipwrecks since.
Oh, I had no idea. No idea.
Good
If
news.
you're just joining us, we're talking with John U. Bacon, best-selling author. This book that he has out, we encourage you to go out and purchase. You can get it from Amazon, local the bookstores. It's called The Gales of November: The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Today being the 50th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Uh, Top three things that you were just blown away by, that just shocked you to the core, that you put in the book.
One, we already mentioned the fact that the Great Lakes are actually more dangerous than the Atlantic Ocean. How could I ever have guessed that?
Yeah.
So that was probably the first shock. Two, just how incredibly important Great Lakes shipping has been to our economy, to our lifestyle, even today. But three, that five of the guys in the ship were about to retire.
Mm.
That is, excuse me, clearly heartbreaking. And I guess if I can stick a fourth one in there,
Mhm.
Bruce Hudson, of course, his ship goes down. His mom, Aunt Ruth, has lost her only child, which I can't fathom.
Mm.
And then 6 months later, she receives a phone call from his girlfriend, Cindy Reynolds, saying, "Guess what? You're going to be a grandmother."
Oh,
So
wow.
that's one of the most incredible stories I've come across in my research.
It puts the faces and the names together, what you've done with this book. And um, I I would assume, because there's so much information, and you had to cut it almost in half, if I remember what you mentioned. Do you feel that you're and maybe I'm putting out a secret, I don't know, but do you see a part 2 coming out potentially in the future? Do you see, kind of revisiting a lot of information that you wanna share with an audience?
It's possible, certainly. Right now, we're still very much in the thick of this, of course,
Mhm.
book tour and so on. But yeah, you never know. The interest, of course, has been very high, and that's been gratifying again for the families as well as for me. As we'll say, there's also some movie talk, but it's Hollywood. It's all talk till it actually
Oh,
happens. So,
all right. Well, we'll look forward to that, and hopefully we'll cross our fingers. I was curious, very early on in the conversation, and if you're just joining us as we get closer to wrapping up this morning with John U. Bacon, the author of The Gales of November: The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. You mentioned that you were out in various states. What were a couple of those states that you have visited, if you
oh
don't mind?
man, let's see. First week alone was Cleveland, Ann Arbor, Miami, DC, and Atlanta, and then Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Butte, Montana, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Traverse City, stopped in Charlevoix and Petoskey to sign books, Marquette, Michigan, Duluth, and then tonight, Whitefish Point. How's that?
That's impressive. The question I have in regards to that then is, do you see the awareness, the connection outside of Michigan? Obviously we have the Great Lakes that border other states and countries too,
Mhm.
but does does Michigan kind of embrace this the most?
I think so. I mean, certainly Minnesota, Wisconsin, they're into it. Chicago's into it. Toledo, naturally, it was called the Toledo Express. Cleveland has a strong bid, but Michigan is the Great Lakes state,
Mhm.
and therefore, no Great Lakes state sees more of these ships than Michigan does.
Yeah.
So I think that it's more part of the Michigan lifestyle, and I'm amazed how many Michiganders actually know a lot of these ships. They see them go past Ludington, they see them go past, of course. Alpena, Rogers City, and the list goes on and on and on. These people are very familiar with these ships in a way that other people usually aren't.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point there. I have asked you a lot of questions today, and I know we just scratched the surface on it, but we wouldn't do our listeners and viewers justice if I didn't ask this question of you. What have we missed sharing that you want to get out there the most? Is there something that we're forgetting to talk about that maybe the listeners or viewers, as they read your book potentially, or want to kind of discover on their own, or maybe it's something they thought about for years and maybe was wrong. So then you were able to present it in the pages of your book. Do you mind
I'd say
sharing that with?
I'd probably say two things there. One is that the Coast Guard's report that came out shortly after the tragedy basically assigned the blame to the deckhands for not latching the Kessner clamps, these C clamps on the 21 hatches well enough, and that's not accurate. It's not fair.
Yeah.
So that one we have largely refuted, at least in my book.
Mhm.
I think other and many others have too. Most folks don't give that much credence. It's more complicated than that, frankly, the whole thing. But they've been largely exonerated. That's certainly good. I would say beyond that, that if you have no interest in maritimes or shipwrecks or even nonfiction, that's the audience here has been so surprisingly broad that don't worry, this is a story that you want to dive into, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many facts that we haven't been able to cover this morning, but it's an opportunity for us to read it. I look forward to it throughout the morning zoo. We're going to give away, and throughout the day, a few of your books, which we love that because it does kind of connect it to home, doesn't it? It we listen to the song, which we haven't played the record of Edmund Fitzgerald yet this morning, but we will after this interview. And you had mentioned that about 85 to 95% roughly of the song fairly accurate in regards to it. Without we don't want to throw Gordon Lightfoot under the bus at all or anything like that, but was there something that is in there that we can kind of pay attention to that might not have been accurate as much?
Well, sure. He says the ship was loaded and going to Cleveland. It was going to unload in Detroit at Zug Island, and then dock for the year at Toledo. But Toledo's not rhyme with that stanza, so I'll give him that one. Of course, and he's writing a song. He's not doing a documentary. So in his
Yeah,
defense,
correct. Yep.
but he also said that the Mariners Church in Detroit was a musty old hall in Detroit. He kind of assumed that because it's so old. The cleaning lady, Rick Haynes, the bass player, just talked to him 10 days ago or so in Aurelia, Ontario, which is Lightfoot's hometown. We're all there together for a big festival. He said, I was there when the cleaning lady comes up to him and says, this hall ain't musty.
I love that. I
So he
love that.
changed the lyrics to rustic old hall. So
Yeah.
he did a very good job there. And he also, when the guys were exonerated on the clamps, he got rid of the line about the main hatchway giving in as well. So he's often corrected things that need to be corrected. But there's again, the song he wrote is a wonderful song, and the families love it, and they play at their own reunions these days.
Yeah, that's a good point there. My final question for you is, other than again reminding listeners and viewers where they can pick up your book. I know it's on Amazon. That's an easy spot to purchase it from. But you are, like I said, at Whitefish Point today. You're going to take part in the activities. What are you looking for at the end of the day to take away, or just the opposite, contribute today?
I'm speaking at both events, and I want to basically let the audience know more about the men on the ship, basically, and how important it all was. And then tonight, when we're sitting at the cruise quarters kitchen, that's where the VIPs stay. I'm not one of them. I stay in a motel here in Paradise. But the family stay there. We all get together around the big block table in the kitchen, and just tell stories and whatnot. I hope we all feel that we've done the crew and the wives and the sons and the daughters justice with our efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be a very, I don't even know the descriptive word for you to be able to sit around those families.
It's an honor. That's very
Yeah,
simple.
that would be okay. That's a good word for sure. John, I appreciate you taking the time. It's been an honor. I hope that we can keep the door open for you to come back and take some time with us. We appreciate you writing this book. And again, for the listeners and viewers, The Gales of November, search for that. The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. John, your website, they can purchase that from too, right?
Sure, johnnubacon.com. The money does not go to me. It goes to you got links there to buy it anywhere you are. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and all the independents around the country, wherever you live. You just punch in your zip code and your local will come up, your local bookstore, and they've all got it these days. They've got it usually by the hundreds. So if they don't, shame on them. But hey,
That's right. Well, when it's on
I
the
know
best,
Schuler Books has got a couple thousand. So
yeah.
they're pretty near you as well.
Yeah, and Bookmark as well downtown.
Bookmark is a great store
Yeah.
downtown Ludington. So yes.
Let's make sure that the listeners and viewers, if you get a chance, pick it up. Let us know, and John, we would love to have you back on in the future. If you'll do us a favor, we're gonna queue up the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and you I believe spent some time in broadcasting, or spend a lot of time talking with us in the broadcasting industry. Would you introduce this song for us so that we can play it to the listeners? Is
Sure.
that okay?
The song is, of course, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot. Came out in 1976. They did not expect it to be on the album. They did not expect it to be a hit. But of course, it was both those things, and finished number 2 that year behind Rod Stewart's Tonight's the Night, which is a whole different song. This song is 6:28, unusually long, very wordy, no chorus, no hook, no guitar solo. It's just a wonderfully told story about a tragedy, and that's why it's still popular today.
All right. You know a lot more than I expected about it. Thank you for introducing it.
Thank you, Chris.
You got it on 102.7 Mom FM and Hot Country Hits 99.9.